Hello guys, and welcome back to another super efficient build guide where today we're looking at steel. And more specifically, we're going to be looking at the alternate recipes for steel ingots, as well as covering basic layouts for steel beams and steel pipes. So with that in mind, you may need some hard drives unlocked in order to get these recipes. Let's jump into it. The vanilla recipe requires 3 iron ore and 3 coal to produce 3 steel ingots. You can actually see that though we've made this quite long, you only need 5 foundations wide by 2 high in order to run this actual setup, and it takes 3 foundries being fed with 120 coal and 120 iron ore along through to these foundries, with one of them being underclocked to 66.7% clock speed to produce 120 steel ingots. If you're wondering how we've set up these foundries, it's pretty simple really. We're going to have our initial merging line leading out of these foundries, and then we have our splitters, or smart splitters as we often use, stacked 2 above one another with a space in between the merger and the splitters. And then from here we're going to grab our elevators. The first one heads straight towards the splitter, and then the second one is facing that elevator, and those are just going to be brought across. This is a really compact and easy way to build manifold lines of foundries. You can get them a lot more compact, and we'll be using them throughout this video. But if you're interested in logistics, then perhaps you'll be interested in today's sponsor, which is Prosperous Universe. Prosperous Universe is a free-to-play space economy simulator, which is now available on Steam. And if you'd like to see how I'd start making my millions in Prosperous Universe, you should check out my previous video on the game, which we covered over a year ago. In this space economy, you can grow your own empire and monopolize the universe. If you want to start with a mining colony company, you can do, or perhaps farming is more your cup of tea, in which case focus on feeding the local populace, or maybe building spaceships is your thing. You can do that also. You get to set up the production chains to produce higher tier items, which can then be sold on to the market. But you have to remember that the stock exchange prices are based on real supply and demand. So you have to be careful what you produce. And once you've sealed the deal, you have to arrange the transportation of said goods. And this is all done in a single universe driven by the community in this massively multiplayer online economy sandbox. Do you have what it takes to understand and exploit the market? Well, check out the link in the description below. But let's get back to the first layout. Now, we've covered this, but I did want to clarify a little bit more. This uses 120 iron, 120 coal, and uses a total of 40.363 megawatts across the 3 foundries. As I mentioned, there is a underclock of 66.7% for one of them, and in return you'll get 120 steel ingots from this. This does mean though that the manifold will have to be running with a Mark II conveyor in order to run efficiently. This build will get you started, however you can't really progress until you start producing steel beams and then producing the Mark III conveyors. In order to do this, you may want to use this particular layout and start off with this. It will require 90 iron ore and 90 coal to run. However, from it, you can run 2 constructors, with one which will produce 20 steel pipes per minute and one that will produce 15 steel beams, allowing you to start upgrading your system. This particular system does follow the vanilla recipes and uses a total of 40 megawatts with everything running at 100% clock speed, so it's really easy to get your head around. The only thing you need to worry about is the splitting and merging, which we'll get to next. The section of this grid that you really need to focus in on is the 4 wide and 5 high foundations at the right of the build. These are the manufacturing segments, and you can actually double this up in order, or triple this up, so that you're producing a manifold line and having the items running. But you can see this is just running the items to these 2 storage units. We have 2 foundries running at 100% clock speed, and all they're doing is running those materials out In fact, what I will do is quickly get rid of this top manifold so that you can see clearly the splitting and merging. We have two foundries. The one on the left is splitting the 45 steel ingots from a splitter, with one line going towards a merger on the right hand side towards the other foundry, and then the other two outputs are being merged into a merger in front of it to go to a constructor which is producing the steel pipes. This is running at 100% clock speed. It only requires 30 steel per minute. And then we have on the right hand side the 15 plus the 45 steel ingots from the first foundry on the right to produce the steel beams, which are then all going towards storage. This is a great and easy layout to start off with once you first unlock steel. From there, you can start working on your Mark III logistics, and once you have the Mark III belts, you can actually up this. So we actually have a blueprint here, which is just this section doubled up, as you can see here. Let's run it this way. This is actually available to our Patreons, but this particular line has the 6 foundries all set up like that one, and they're going to be taking 270 iron ore and 270 coal along these two splitting manifolds, and then producing from that 270 steel ingots, which are merged along the bottom and run to the end. It's a really simple system and really easy to get started with. And on the subject of Patreons, those that do support us gain the bonus of not just these blueprints, but also this particular world, so that you can run around and check out all of the layouts yourself in first person to see how they're done. Let's move on to the next and first alternate recipe, which is with petroleum coke. This particular alternate recipe is an odd one for me, and for most people I wouldn't recommend using it unless you do have spare petroleum coke available. We have a 7 wide by, I believe it's 7 high grid here. Now it's going to be taking a total of 60 crude oil along the bottom line into 2 refineries. Now they're using the rubber setup to produce heavy oil residue, and I think it's a total of 40 rubber per minute. If you want the rubber, great, use it. But that heavy oil is then sent up to the top refinery, where it is turned into petroleum coke and then run along the foundries in the bottom left of the screen. These are both set to 80% each and merged with 120 iron to produce a total of 160 steel ingots. This does mean that you gain more steel for the amount of iron that you're using, but it really isn't worth it in my eyes when it comes to wasting crude oil on that. Iron is the most easily available resource in game, second only to water, for example. The recipe is also very power hungry, using a total of 113.066 megawatts in order to run. Our third recipe is also another odd one. It's the compacted steel ingots recipe. Now this does up your steel production considerably, but at the cost of using sulfur, which is a rarer resource. So I don't recommend this one, generally speaking. And if you do want to use this, you will have to unlock compacted coal in the MAM, followed by the compacted steel ingots recipe. So you're using 2 hard drives to unlock this. It's going to require 60 sulfur, 60 coal, 120 iron ore, and 116.221 megawatts of power to produce 200 steel ingots. This particular layout has a 9 wide by 6 high grid, and we have, first of all, 3 assemblers on the right-hand side. These 3 assemblers are set to compacted coal, and they're all set to 80% clock speed and fed with the 60 coal and 60 sulfur, so 20 for each assembler of each resource. The compacted coal is then run along to the foundry setup that we used earlier on. This then takes that 60 compacted coal and merges it with 120 iron ore to produce a total of 200 compacted steel ingots. However, you will need to set one of these particular foundries to 33.3%, or underclock two of them to 66.67% if you want an even distribution. At this point, I would still recommend using the vanilla recipe. However, we do have my favorite steel ingot recipe, which is the solid steel ingot. This particular recipe requires you to already have produced iron ingots rather than just using the iron ore. And you will merge 2 iron ingots to 2 coal, and this will produce a total of 3 steel ingots. So you have a net gain of 1 steel ingot for each iron and coal that you use versus the standard recipe, which makes it pretty good. This means that with the following layout, you're able to produce 180 solid steel ingots out of just 120 coal and 120 iron ore. And this is only going to take up 64 megawatts of power. Looking at this layout, we have an 8 wide by 7 high grid. First, we have the iron ore heading along a line to 4 smelters where they're producing the iron ingots at 100% clock speed. These iron ingots are then run across to the 3 foundries where they will also be met up with 120 coal along the top manifold. These will then be set each to solid steel ingots and running at 100% clock speed to produce a total of 180 steel per minute. This is a super easy layout to run and is very efficient for both your resources and your energy. And this nicely brings us to talking about the steel beams. Now, this particular layout is one that's really simple to do and so easy to pair up with the previous layout, where we're producing 180 steel ingots. So I would recommend, if you are going to pair these up, you just place the constructors each in front of a single foundry, and they will be able to run at 100% clock speed, each consuming 60 steel ingots to produce 15 steel beams each per minute. Okay, so I was talking about it and then decided to do it to just give you a very quick example, but you can see how we've got the 3 foundries running straight into the constructors, and they're producing those 45 solid steel beams from the solid steel ingot recipe. Steel pipes are equally as easy to produce. Each constructor requires 30 steel pipes per minute, and from there you can use 60 steel ingots to produce a total of 40 steel pipes. And that's just 2 constructors running vanilla at 100% clock speed, as there are no alternative recipes to steel pipes. That being said, you may notice that we have 60 steel ingots, which is the same that we need for the steel beams. So what we can actually do, taking the 45 solid steel ingot steel beams setup, we can actually double up the constructors, as you can see here, to produce steel pipes instead. And that will produce 120 steel pipes per minute from a total of 120 iron ore and 120 coal. Not bad. I'm very much hoping in the next episode we will be covering the encased industrial beams and maybe even the heavy modular frames as well. But guys, we are going to leave it there. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please do drop a thumbs up. And if you want to see more, don't forget to subscribe. And if you would like the blueprints to this or even the actual save, then do check out Patreon. Special thanks does go to Prosperous Universe for sponsoring this video, as well as all of our amazing supporters over on Patreon, who without them we couldn't produce this content. Most notably our Solo-Eclipse patrons James Owen, Firefless Trebor and Beowulf, as well as our Lunas, the Calamity, Ben, Star, Shoku the MN Wolf, That Dude AW, and our Blood Moon of the day, which today is Dashlom. Until next time, as always, ciao for now.